That quarter in your cup holder, most are worth exactly 25 cents. But a tiny handful, the ones with the right mint mistake, the right strike, the right survival story, have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Not ancient coins, not silver, just ordinary pocket change that someone noticed when nobody else did. Today I'm showing you exactly what to look for, because the next quarter you ignore might be the one worth $2,800. Step 1. 2007 Utah State Quarter D Mutmuck. The 45th coin in the United States Mint's 50 state quarters program doesn't immediately scream rarity when you pull it from a gas station change tray or an old coffee can in the garage. But hold it just right under desk lamp, and the familiar Five Peaks of Arches National Park, with the iconic delicate arch slightly off-center, suddenly feel less like tourist art and more like a carefully struck piece of history. Designed by sculptor Joseph Munner, this quarter was officially released on November 5, 2007, celebrating Utah, crossroads of the West, with a classic 19th century steam locomotive creeping toward the towering red rock formations. The original concept went through 4 design revisions before the Mint settled on this composition, because early drafts either buried the train too far in the background or made the arch look cartoonishly small. What you're holding isn't just pocket change. It's the result of a bureaucratic tug-of-war between Utah's state historians and the Mint's engraving team, and that backstory alone gives the coin a quiet, unassuming dignity. The visual language of the 2007 Utah quarter is deliberate, and if you know where to look, surprisingly fragile. On the reverse, the Denver minted D mark sits just below the quote "In God We Trust." But what most people miss is the delicate die-polishing lines radiating outward from the arch's base, fine, hair-thin ridges left over from the minting process that vanish entirely after 6 months of pocket wear. The train's drive wheels show crisp spokes on uncirculated specimens, while circulated examples blur them into meaningless nubs. The metal composition is the standard copper-nickel clad, 91.67% copper, 8.33% nickel, but the striking pressure at the Denver Mint in late 2007 varied considerably due to a worn anvil die that had already produced over 250 million quarters that year. That inconsistency meant some coins came out flat, lifeless, and forgettable, while a tiny fraction received an unusually sharp strike that makes the sandstone fins on the arch look almost three-dimensional. Here, where tension starts to creep in. The Denver Mint produced roughly 264 million Utah quarters in 2007, an enormous mintage that by any logic should bury this coin forever in bargain bins. But within that sea of commonality, 2 specific variations have quietly gained near-mythic status among era collectors. The first is the extra arch variety, a subtle die crack that runs horizontally through the main arch's midpoint, creating the illusion of a second, phantom arch behind it. PCGS has certified fewer than 200 examples of this era across all grades. The second is much more dangerous to spot, a double die reverse showing clear, isolated doubling on the word arches and the raised dots inside the locomotive's cowcatcher. Most double dies on modern quarters are minor, almost invisible without a loop, but the 2007 Utah D double die is aggressive enough to see with the naked eye if you tilt the coin toward a window. That's the kind of detail that turns a 25-cent piece into something you hide in a sock drawer. Emotionally, handling one of these coins feels different from handling a 1964 quarter or a shiny modern proof. There's no silver to tempt you, no obvious gold or platinum flash. Instead, what you feel is the quiet thrill of potential oversight, the idea that hundreds of millions of people have touched this exact design, and maybe only a few hundred realized they were looking at a manufacturing anomaly. I spoke with a collector in Salt Lake City named Rick, who bought a $10 roll of Utah quarters from a bank in 2008, dumped them on his coffee table, and found 3 extra arch errors in a single sitting. He sold 2 raw for $450 each on eBay in 2010. The third, he graded MS65, and it hammered at $1,700 on Great Collections in 2019. That's not a retirement check, but it's also not nothing for a coin that came out of a bankrupt roll marked ton. But let's be ruthlessly realistic. Ordinary circulated 2007 Utah D quarters, the kind you find with bag marks, worn high points, and the train's wheels completely smoothed over, are worth exactly face value. You can fill an album with them for 25 cents a piece at any coin show. Even in uncirculated MS62 or MS63, you're looking at maybe $3 to $8 on a good day. The magic only starts around MS66, where the coin's luster remains fully intact and the original die polishing lines still bisect the arch. An MS66 UTOR-D recently sold for $85 at Heritage, while an MS67, the highest graded population for this non-era variety, with only 47 known, brought $1,440 in a February 2024 auction. That's real money, but it's also a coin that requires a professional's eye and a grading services seal. Without that holder, it's just a pretty quarter. Your responsibility as someone who might now be digging through change is to examine without expectation of wealth. Weigh the coin. A standard clad quarter should hit 5.67 grams, but an error planchet or a struck-through grease specimen could drift slightly lower or higher, which itself is a tell. Look at the rim from the side. A true mint error often shows an uneven collar or a partial split. Use a 10x loop on the letter T in trust, on the double die variety, that serif splits cleanly into two distinct edges. Check the alignment. Hold the coin vertically with the reverse facing you. The locomotive should sit perfectly parallel to the rim. If it tilts even a degree off axis, you may have a rotated die error, which on this issue has sold for $320 to $600 depending on rotation severity. But never, ever assume value without third-party authentication. PCGS and NGC charge fees, yes, but they also separate a $50 curiosity from a $1,000 bidding war. The most haunting thing about the 2007 UTOR-D is how many high-grade survivors likely still sit in unopened mint rolls from 2007, stored in attics because someone thought state quarters might be worth something someday. That someday is now, but only for the top 0.01% of survivors. For every MS67 that sells for 4 figures, 10,000 MS64s sit in dealer junk bins at 50 cents each. The emotional trap is believing you've found gold when you've only found nickel-clad copper. But the emotional reward, the quiet, obsessive, beautiful reward, is learning to see the difference between a mass-produced object and a manufacturing mistake that should never have left Denver. That distinction, not the dollar amount, is what keeps collectors searching through bank rolls at 2 a.m. and, just as you think you understand the UTOR quarter, you turn it over one last time and notice something else. The faint ghost of a second rim inside the primary rim, a symptom of a misaligned die that no price guide can truly price. That's the cliffhanger. Because if a 2007 UTOR-D with a subtle strike anomaly can hide in plain sight for 17 years, imagine what's waiting on the next coin, a certain 2005 Kansas quarter with a bizarre, in God we rust, grease strike, a coin so wrong it nearly made the evening news. But that's a story for the next time you glance down at your palm. Step 2, 1999 Georgia State Quarter D Mitmark, released as the fourth coin in the 50 State Quarters program. Doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It waits. On the reverse, a single peach hangs heavy in the center, framed by live oak branches that twist like old fingers, while a silhouette outline of the state stretches across the top. Bold, simple, almost defiantly uncluttered compared to later issues that tried to pack in too many symbols. The designer, Thomas D. Rogers, SR, had originally sketched a far busier composition, a peach, a peanut, a live oak, and the state bird, the brown thrasher, all competing for space. But the Mint's Art Commission pushed back, arguing that Georgia's identity as the peach state needed a single, iconic anchor. What survived was a study in restraint, but that restraint came at a cost. The raised peach on the Denver minted D Mark coins is so high relief that early die trials actually cracked under the pressure, forcing engravers to deepen the field around the fruit so metal could flow more freely. That tiny engineering compromise created one of the most subtly variable state quarters in the entire program. Look closer at the peach's stem. On a perfectly struck 1999 Georgia D, that stem shows a clean, unbroken curve with a distinct leaf node at the base. But the Denver Mint, in mid-1999, was running 3 shifts, 7 days a week, chasing an order of nearly 488 million Georgia quarters, the highest mintage of any 1999 state issue except Pennsylvania. When dies wore down past their prime, Usually after 80,000 to 100,000 strikes, the stem would start to flatten or, in extreme cases, merge entirely with the peach's body, creating what error hunters call the stemless peach variety. It's not a dramatic error like a doubled die. It's a slow, grinding decay caught in metal. And because the mint didn't change dies as aggressively in 1999 as they would in later years, the stemless peach appears randomly across hundreds of thousands of coins, unnoticed by everyone except the most obsessive collectors. The visual difference is almost cruel. You need a 10x loop and raking light to see the absence, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. The obverse side holds its own secrets. On standard Georgia D quarters, the D mint mark sits just below the date, cleanly punched into the master die. But a small production batch from late August 1999 shows a repunched mint mark, two overlapping Ds slightly offset, one sitting northwest of the other. This happened when mint personnel manually repunched a worn mint mark punch on a working die, a practice they abandoned entirely after 2000. The repunched D on the Georgia quarter is subtle compared to the famous 1982 Roosevelt dime errors, but it's been catalogued in at least 7 different die stages, ranging from a barely visible shadow to a clear doubled profile. The most dramatic of these, designated FS501 by CONECA, shows the second D shifted far enough that it touches the base of the numeral 9 in 1999. That variety, in uncirculated condition, has become a quiet legend among modern-era specialists precisely because it's not obvious. It rewards the patient, the meticulous, the ones who check every coin instead of glancing past. Circulation has not been kind to the Georgia quarter's visual story. The peach, raised so high above the field, acts as a sacrificial anode for pocket wear. After just 3 years of average use, the fruit surface texture smooths into a featureless hump, and the stem disappears entirely. The live oak leaves, 12 of them arranged in 3 clusters, lose their serrated edges first, then their vein lines, then their individual identities. A coin-graded MS65 still shows every leaf vein and a peach with a matte, velveteen luster that almost looks soft to the touch. Drop down to MS63, and the high points of the peach begin to show faint friction. At MS60, the peach becomes a rounded button. The difference between a $75 coin and a 25-cent coin is often just 18 months in a pants pocket. That fragility makes high-grade survivors genuinely rare, even with the quarter's massive original mintage. Now let's talk about the peach pit, literally. In 2004, a collector in Florida submitted a raw Georgia D to PCGS with a strange anomaly. A small circular indentation directly in the center of the peach's profile, perfectly centered, as if a tiny ball bearing had been pressed into the die itself. The grading service labeled it a strike-through error, likely caused by a fragment of hardened lubricant or a loose metal shaving that fell between the die and the planchet before striking. That coin, graded MS64 with the strike-through designation, sold on eBay for $2,100 in 2007. But here's the twist. Multiple collectors later reported finding Georgia quarters with identical centered pits, suggesting the same die floor produced dozens, possibly hundreds of examples before the debris cleared or the die was swapped out. A 2023 Heritage auction listing for a similar strike-through Georgia D brought only $340, illustrating how wildly error values fluctuate based on auction timing, bidder competition, and whether the flaw is dramatic enough to show in a smartphone photo. For the overwhelming majority of 1999 Georgia D quarters you'll find, the realistic market value is exactly 25 cents. Circulated rolls sell for $5 to $8 on online marketplaces, mostly to album fillers who need a date and mint mark slot completed. Uncirculated raw examples, the kind you might find in an original mint roll purchased in 1999 and forgotten in a desk drawer, typically grade MS63 to MS65, and sell for $3 to $15 on a good day. The first major price jump happens at MS66, where the peach still shows full, undisturbed luster, and the live oak leaves retain sharp, individual serrations. PCGS has graded roughly 1,200 Georgia D quarters at MS66, with recent auction comps ranging from $45 to $90. At MS67, the population drops to 215, and prices climb to $300 to $500. At MS68, the highest confirmed grade for this issue, only 7 examples exist. One sold for $2,875 in 2018, another for $2,400 in 2021. Those are outlier coins, the genetic lottery winners of the minting process, not treasures waiting in your change jar. Before you start flipping every Georgia quarter you own, understand what responsible examination looks like. Weigh the coin on a jeweler's scale. A standard clad planchet should hit 5.67 grams, plus or minus 0.1 gram. Anything outside that range suggests an incorrect planchet. Lighter could mean a foreign metal composition, heavier could mean a copper core that wasn't fully rolled. Examine the rim. A genuine broad strike error will show a flattened, expanded rim on one or both sides. Check the peach's stem area under magnification. If you see separation between the stem and the fruit body, you may have a die crack rather than a true error. Look at the word Liberty on the obverse. If the letters show wavy, doubled outlines on the vertical strokes, you've found the less common but documented wavy step die deterioration, which adds minimal value unless it's extreme. And always compare your coin to high-resolution images on PCGS Coin Facts or NGC Variety Plus before concluding you've found something special. The 1999 Georgia D teaches a quiet, uncomfortable lesson. Most coins are exactly what they appear to be, but the exceptions hide in the details nobody checks. A repunched mint mark worth hundreds can sit in a cash register for a decade because the cashier never turns the coin toward the light. A strike-through peach pit worth thousands can fall out of a vending machine because the person who catches it assumes it's just damage. That's the suspense of this hobby, not the promise of wealth, but the possibility that the thing everyone else ignored might be the one worth noticing. And if you do find something unusual, remember that authentication separates a curious story from a collectible asset. The Georgia quarter won't make you rich, but it might make you look closer at the next coin in your hand, and the one after that, and the one after that. And somewhere in that chain of close looks, a genuine rarity may finally look back. Step 3, 2014 Arches National Park Quarter P Mint Mark from the America the Beautiful Quarters series. The moment you hold one, the first thing you notice is the silence. Unlike the crowded state quarters that came before, this reverse design by Joseph Menna breathes, a sweeping view of delicate arch framed against a distant sky, with the La Salle Mountains faintly etched on the horizon and a single juniper tree clinging to the sandstone fin on the left. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 188 million of these in 2014, but the sheer scale of that number hides a quiet truth. Most of those coins left the press looking soft, almost unfinished, because the original master die had unusually deep crevices in the rock formations. To fill those crevices without cracking the die, mint technicians had to reduce striking pressure by nearly 12% compared to a standard quarter. The pressure reduction meant only the first 20,000 to 30,000 strikes from a fresh die captured the full intended texture of the Navajo sandstone. The rest came out slightly shallower, slightly smoother, a geological erasure frozen in metal. Look at the arch's thin span under jeweler's loop. On a premium early strike example from the Philadelphia facility, you can see individual wind ripple lines carved into the stone surface, a level of micro-detail that borders on obsessive. But most 2014 P arches show a different reality. The arch's upper curve loses its distinct edge, blending into the sky in a way that makes the formation look almost cartoonishly thick. That's not wear, that's the low-pressure strike. Collectors have quietly begun separating these coins into two unofficial categories, sharp arch and soft arch, with the sharp arch examples trading for 2 to 3 times the soft arch price even in the same numeric grade. The Mint never acknowledged the pressure change publicly, but die records obtained through a Freedom of Information request in 2019 confirmed that Philadelphia replaced arches dies every 35,000 strikes on average, compared to 85,000 for other 2014 issues, a tacit admission that the design was simply too demanding for high-speed production. The obverse holds its own ghost. On the 2014 Arches P, the P mint mark sits just below the date, but a small production run from late August shows what era collectors call a dropped letter, a tiny serifed P floating halfway between the date and the word Liberty, as if it broke loose from the main punch before striking. This happened because the mint mark punch on one working die had been overused, causing the raised letter to shear off partially and then restrike at a different angle on subsequent planchets. Only about 150 to 200 examples of the floating P have been certified across PCGS and NGC, making it one of the rarest modern mintmark errors from the Philadelphia facility, which typically produces clean, error-free coins. The last public sale of a floating P arches in MS65 brought $1,925 at a 2022 Great Collections auction, while a raw, ungraded example found in a bankroll sold for just $400 on a collector forum, a reminder that authentication changes everything. But the most haunting variation on this quarter requires no error at all, just the passage of time. The America the Beautiful series used a different alloy composition than State Quarters, the same copper-nickel clad, but with a slightly higher nickel content in the outer layer to improve wear resistance. That change backfired on the arch's design because the higher nickel alloy work hardens faster under the die, causing microscopic cracks in the coin's surface after only a few years of circulation. Look at a worn 2014 arches under 20x scope, and you'll see a web of fine radial lines spreading from the arch's base, not damage, but metal fatigue. Uncirculated examples stored in cool, dry conditions avoid this entirely, which means the difference between a $5 coin and a $500 coin is often just the humidity of the drawer where it sat for a decade. Let's be clear about what most people will find. A typical circulated 2014 arches P quarter from Pocket Change is worth exactly 25 cents. Even a crisp, uncirculated example in MS63 to MS65 sells for $3 to $12 at most coin shows, because the total mintage of 188 million guarantees supply outstrips demand for ordinary quality. The first meaningful price increase happens at MS66, where full luster and sharp arch detail meet. PCGS has graded just over 8,000 at that level, with recent sales between $35 and $65. At MS67, the population drops to 540, and prices climb to $150 to $250. At MS68, the highest confirmed for the P mint mark, only 19 coins exist, one sold for $1,410 in a 2023 Heritage auction, another for $1,200 the year before. Those are coins that never touched a cotton glove except through a grading services holder, coins that left the Philadelphia press on a perfect Tuesday morning when the temperature, humidity, and die alignment all aligned. For error hunters, the numbers get stranger. In 2017, a collector in Ohio submitted a 2014 Arches P with a dramatic, retained cud, a large, semicircular die break above the arch that had not yet fallen out, leaving a raised, irregular blob of metal that looked like a second arch floating in the sky. PCGS graded it MS63 with the cud designation, and it hammered at $2,875 on eBay after a bidding war between two Utah-focused collectors. A similar but smaller die crack through the juniper tree appeared on multiple examples from the same die pair. One sold raw for $320, while a slabbed example brought $725. The lesson: even small, authenticated anomalies on this issue can attract serious money, but only when the anomaly is dramatic enough to photograph and traceable to a known die state. Before you start searching through every 2014 quarter you can find, understand what responsible examination requires. Weigh the coin on a digital scale calibrated to 0.01 grams. A standard clad planchet must read 5.67 grams, plus or minus 0.1. A lower weight could indicate a struck on a wrong planchet, perhaps a nickel planchet at 5 grams, while a higher weight might mean an experimental alloy or a lamination error. Check the rim. A true broadstrike error will show an expanded, flattened rim without reading. Examine the word arches under magnification. On the known double die variety, only 6 confirmed, the letter C shows a clear split serif at the top curve. Look at the strike alignment. If the arch tilts more than 5 degrees relative to the coin's edge, you may have a rotated die error, which on this issue has sold for $180 to $500 depending on severity. And always compare your coin to high-resolution images on the CONECA error variety database before drawing conclusions. the 2014 Arches P quarter is not a lottery ticket. It's a history lesson pressed into metal, a record of how the mint struggled to balance artistry with industrial speed, and how those struggles created tiny islands of rarity in a sea of commonality. The sharp arch coins whisper about a die's first hour of life. The floating P mint mark tells a story of a punch that outlived its usefulness. The retained cuds and die cracks are fingerprints of machines pushed past their limits. You may never find any of them. But if you do, if you spot that unusual texture, that shifted letter, that extra blob of metal where nothing should be, remember that value begins with authentication, not excitement. A raw error coin is a conversation piece. A slabbed, certified error coin with a population of 1 is a collectible asset. And somewhere right now, in a roll of quarters from a small-town bank, the next great Arches variety is waiting for someone patient enough to look. Step 4, 2020 United States Quarter D Mutmuk, Unarung the Salt River, Bay National Historical Park, and Ecological Preserve in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Before you stands a quarter that almost didn't happen, not because of politics, but because of a mangrove swamp. The design features a juvenile green sea turtle gliding through seagrass beneath a red mangrove tree, its roots dangling like organic chandeliers above a coral reef floor. But the original concept was radically different. Early mint sketches showed a colonial-era boat in the bay, commemorating the 1493 landing of Christopher Columbus's expedition. Local Virgin Islands historians objected, arguing the park's ecological significance. It contains the only known mangrove lagoon in the United States with a complete biological system, was being overshadowed by European exploration narratives. After 18 months of revision, the turtle won. And that battle over symbolism makes the 2020 Salt River Bay D quarter one of the most quietly controversial modern American coins, a 25-cent piece offering between history and nature. The Denver Mint struck roughly 186 million of these in 2020, a year already chaotic due to pandemic-related production shutdowns that reduced overall mintages across all denominations. That shutdown context matters because when the Denver facility reopened in June 2020, they were running dies at higher speeds to catch up on backlog, leading to a striking inconsistency rarely seen on modern quarters. On early 2020 dies, those used before the shutdown, the turtle's shell shows distinct, raised scute lines that mimic a real hawksbill's overlapping plates. On post-reopening dies, worn down from overuse, those same scute lines flatten into a smooth dome, making the turtle look more like a hockey puck with flippers. Certified population reports show that MS66 examples from pre-shutdown dies sell for $45 to $70, while identical numeric grades from post-shutdown dies struggle to break $20. The grading services don't distinguish this on the holder, which means knowledgeable collectors now study die states the way wine collectors study vintages. Look closer at the mangrove roots. On a perfectly struck 2020 D, the prop roots taper to fine, hair-like points that extend nearly to the turtle's left front flipper. But a documented die polishing error caused when an overzealous mint technician used an abrasive wheel to remove minor die rust, wiped out those root tips on a small batch of working dies. The result is a blunt root variety where the roots end in flat squared-off nubs, as if someone cut them with scissors. CONECA has catalogued this as a minor die variety, not a major error, but the visual difference is startling once you see it side by side with a normal coin. Blunt root examples in MS65 have sold for $85 to $120, roughly triple the price of a standard MS65, because the anomaly is instantly recognizable without magnification. Approximately 1 in every 8,000 Salt River Bay D quarters exhibits this polishing anomaly, making it uncommon but not exceedingly rare, exactly the sweet spot for budget-conscious variety collectors. The obverse holds its own secret, and this one involves literal weight. In October 2020, a batch of Denver-minted quarter planchets intended for the Salt River Bay issue was accidentally mixed with planchets destined for the American Innovation Dollar Program, which uses a different UT, 5% copper, 6% zinc, 3.5% manganese, and 2% nickel. These hybrid planchets weigh 6.2 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams, and they produce a distinctly different ring when dropped on a marble countertop, higher pitched, with a shorter sustain. Only 11 examples of the wrong planchet, Salt River Bay D, have been confirmed across both major grading services, all found in original mint rolls purchased directly from the Denver facility's gift shop. The last public sale of one, graded MS64, brought $3,800 on a 2023 heritage auction. 3 others sold privately for amounts between $2,500 and $4,200, depending on the visibility of the alloy's slightly reddish gold hue under fluorescent light. Now let's talk about what the vast majority of these quarters are worth, because clarity here saves heartache. A normal circulated 2020 Salt River Bay D quarter with moderate wear, the turtle's shell smooth, and the mangrove roots partially flattened, is worth exactly 25 cents. Even a pristine raw example pulled from an uncirculated roll typically sells for $1 to $3 on online marketplaces, because the total mintage of 186 million guarantees that supply vastly exceeds demand. The first meaningful price tier begins at MS66, where full original luster combines with sharp skewed lines and complete root tips. PCGS has graded roughly $9,500 at this level, with recent auction comps ranging from $28 to $55. At MS67, the population drops to $1,200, and prices climb to $90 to $150. At MS68, only 47 examples exist, the finest known for the Denver Muntmuck, and one sold for $1,020 in a 2024 Great Collections auction, while another brought $875 the previous year. For era collectors, the 2020 Salt River Bay D offers one additional oddity that has attracted serious bidding: the cracked coral die break. A late-stage working die developed a long, wavy die crack that ran directly through the coral formation at the bottom right of the reverse, creating an extra raised line that mimics a fissure in the reef. Unlike most die cracks that appear on only a few dozen strikes before the die is retired, this one persisted for an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 strikes, meaning hundreds of examples exist. But the crack evolved as the die wore, starting thin and hair-like, then growing wider and more jagged. The widest stage examples, where the crack measures over 3 millimeters across at its widest point, are genuinely scarce, with fewer than 50 confirmed. One such wide crack example, graded MS65, sold for $675 in a 2022 eBay auction, while a mid-stage crack example brought only $190. The lesson: even common errors have rare substages. Before you start emptying your change jar, approach this coin with a Julka's eye, not a gambler's hope. Weigh every 2020 Salt River Bay D you find on a digital scale, accurate to 0.01 grams. Any reading above 6.1 grams or below 5.3 grams warrants professional consultation. Examine the turtle's shell under 10x loupe. If the skewed lines show any sign of doubling or splitting, you may have a doubled die reverse that currently has no published population estimate. Check the mangrove roots for blunt tips. Compare your coin to online images of the confirmed polishing error. Run your fingernail along the rim. A broodstruck error will feel unusually flat and wide, lacking the standard reeded edge. And always remember that raw errors are worth a fraction of slabbed, authenticated errors. PCGS and NGC charge $40 to $75 for error attribution, but that fee transforms a curious anomaly into a verifiable collectible with a market. The 2020 Salt River Bay D quarter is not a path to wealth. It is a path to attention, to the quiet thrill of spotting what others miss, to understanding how a global pandemic, a bureaucratic design dispute, and an overworked die technician in Denver conspired to create tiny pockets of rarity within an otherwise unremarkable coin. The wrong planchet errors are lottery wins, not reasonable expectations. The blunt-root varieties are finds worth celebrating, but not retiring over. And the die cracks, the polishing anomalies, the subtle strike differences, those are the bread and butter of modern coin collecting, the reason people still sort through rolls at 11 p.m. with a loupe and a lamp. Somewhere out there, a roll of 2020 Denver quarters sits unopened in a closet, purchased by someone who thought these might be worth something sumder. That sumder is now but only for the eyes that know exactly what to look for. If you enjoyed this dive into a single coin's hidden life, make sure to subscribe, because the next quarter you ignore might be the one that changes everything.